Is it better?
Hello, good night. Welcome to Legalize this 8th day of June, 2025. So tonight we have a panel and we will engage in discussions on the issue of physical planning. Striking a balance, the purpose and importance of physical planning, the nature and methods of the work of the PDA, Physical Development Authority, in the context of the Physical Planning and Development Control Act of Grenada, 2016. And tonight we have with us Ms. Janis Lessey, who is the acting CEO of the Planning and Development Authority. We have Dr. Kenrick Fraser, who is a specialist in leadership practitioner, expertise in construction, architecture, and other fields. We have attorney at law Kenneth Fortune. He's appeared in his personal capacity, but he has a relationship with the Planning and Development Authority. Of course, we have the co-host, Ms. Aisha Mclean, and of course, I'm Joseph Ewart. But before we get into the program, I just want to recognize those who are sponsoring this program, namely Jail Professional Solutions, Inc., Gem FM carrying the program on FM radio out of Canada, and also Grenada Technical and Allied Workers Union, GTAU.
Attention all workers, your health and safety at work are critical. At Grenada Technical and Allied Workers Union, we are dedicated to ensuring you have a safe and secure work environment. If you encounter unsafe conditions or are involved in an accident, take immediate actions. Report it to the company, your shop steward, and make sure it reaches your union. Your health and safety is a priority, and a strong union means a strong voice for your rights. Don't wait. Address concerns right away and protect your well-being. For a safer workplace and a better quality of life, stand with the Grenada Technical and Allied Workers Union. Together, we can create a safer, healthier work environment for everyone.
And of course, this program is also carried on Facebook, and it is permanently stored on YouTube. So it's a contribution we are all making, hopefully, to the process of development of our country. And what better subject to discuss than physical planning, which is a matter which is associated with tension. There's always tension between, when development brings tension, there's always tension between development and preserving. And hopefully we will get into those issues tonight. As I said, we have Ms. Lessey, who is steeped in the operation of the practices, the processes of the physical planning unit. We have with us Dr. Kenrick Fraser, as I said, who will bring a broader perspective, and Attorney at Law Fortune. So welcome to all of you. Welcome, Ms. Lessey. We're not hearing you.
Thank you, and it is my pleasure to be here. And good night to the panel, and of course to your listening audience.
Yes, yes. Mr. Fortune, good night.
Thank you again. It is a pleasure to be here, and good evening again to yourself, Mr. Layne, and Ms. Mclean as the co-host of this program. Ms. Lessey, Dr. Fraser, your listeners and viewers, good evening, and I of course anticipate a very meaningful discussion, and I am looking forward to learning as much from you as we exchange in this exercise. Good evening.
Dr. Fraser, good evening.
Hey, yeah, hi, Colonel. Thanks for the opportunity to be part of this panel. I think it's a very timely and interesting topic. I'm hoping that I could bring my experiences, expertise, and perspective to add value and momentum to the process that will ultimately enhance the Grenada landscape and put Grenada, reposition Grenada on the map, so to speak.
And good night to you, Aisha.
Good evening, Mr. Layne.
Mm-hmm.
And good evening to our guests this evening. I'm very excited to have this discussion. I think it's timely, and I expect an engaging session this evening.
Right. So we could maybe Ms. Lessey, why physical planning? Why are people not allowed to just go about their business and who want to build homes, who want to build roads, who want to put up businesses? Why have this physical planning unit and these processes and these applications? Some people complain and say that this just slows down development, and it is a heavy hand of bureaucracy on the process of development. So why the importance of that? Physical
Well,
planning?
I am so pleased to see Mr. Fortune there. I mean, he worked as a legal counsel for the authority for quite some time, and I'm glad he's there as a backup for me because he's very familiar with Act number 23 of 2016. Good to see you, Mr. Fortune. But I would say it is all about development control. It's really about having regulations in terms of how to build, where to build, and the criteria for establishing and conducting development in the environment. That's what physical planning is all about.
Dr. Fraser, why physical planning? Why should I, if I want to or anyone else, any Grenadian, they want to extend on their house or they have a piece of land, they want to divide up the land. We will a bit more into that. Why they want to put a road somewhere? Why should there be this these planning procedures and license and all that?
I think in a simplistic concept, physical planning is the co-location of infrastructure to support residential, commercial, and socio-political aspects of life. These fundamental items requires a broad range of disciplines that will help glue them together synergistically. To give a very basic example, a sewer line and a water line, need some level of collocation, but they ought to be order. If not, there could be impact on quality of life, health of the community. If you're going to situate a hospital, if you're going to situate restaurants, a port, there ought to be some level of order in order to prevent chaos, the engineering aspects of it, the demographics. There's a broad range of considerations that has to be factored into physical planning. And there's different layers of it. For example, regional, there could be tongue planning. In the context of Grenada, parish planning. We could talk about urban planning, rural planning, community planning. So there's a multifaceted series of aspects that has to be glued together in a systematic way so as to make sense, not just socio-political sense, but also economic sense. That's my thought.
Okay. Mr. Fortune, you want to?
Thank you, Mr. Layne. And I think my short answer, without repeating what the panel would have said, is the why is because it's the law. And of course, when we look at the law, and you look at, first of all, the long title of the law, Mr. Layne, it essentially answers your question, because the act was created to make provision for orderly and progressive development. And the orderly is important there, because what you would have if you don't have laws in place in regards to how development would take place is that you would have chaos. So, for instance, you may not have a situation where, for instance, with the authority, there are areas that are marked residential areas, and you may find without laws, persons may set up a factory in the middle of a residential area. Now, you have to look at the health implications. You have to look at the environmental implications. And so I think Parliament saw it fit to say, no, let's do this thing in an orderly manner. Let's do this thing in a way that, there can be some control. And as a result, I believe that is the premise under which the 2016 Act would have been enacted. And that is the act that we have to follow in regards to development.
Aisha, you want to come in?
Yes, I do. So thank you so much, everyone, for answering the question. So, in the regular sense, you often hear people complaining, why I had to do this? Why is this important? What is the process? And why does it take so long? So my question really is, and I will put it to Ms. Lessey first, if it is that you are so minded to walk us through the whys, why is it that people need to come to the authority to get permission to develop before they do so?
Right. So as some of the panelists already said, it's the law, one. And secondly, it's all about orderly development. It's ensuring that when you build, you're not encroaching on boundaries of neighboring properties. You're not encroaching on roadsides, that you have permission to utilize the land, that the development, that is the structure, is going to be, to repeat the word, structurally sound, and that it meets the basic criteria according to the OECS building code. There's just so much. And then, of course, it's, let's not forget, there is a little bit of revenue that comes from the whole process of application as well, which isn't the key factor, but it's not a profitable entity. But we do get some revenue when people apply for permission. So it's very, very broad, but just for the sake of this discussion, I would have given you some reasons why it's absolutely. And plus, it's a requirement of most financial institutions. I'd venture to say that every time a person is going for a loan in any of the financial institutions, save and except when they are doing some smaller renovations, some of the credit unions, they may be quite generous in giving those small amount of money for these types of developments. And we are actually trying to say to people that, hey, it's not just the initial application to do a house, but if you're doing expansions, renovations, putting in other floors, all of that requires planning permission, because again, we want to make sure that you're keeping with the building code. We saw what just happened with Beryl and Ivan before that. And so, the planning, the services that planning provide it's really needed.
Thank you so much, Ms. Lessey. So in those circumstances, would you walk us through the process of applying for planning permissions? Because it is something that often seems very daunting to people, so if it is that you can give us some light, we'd appreciate that.
Right.
Even before you go, I want to add a little bit of
yeah.
It's basically the same, but to give you something concrete. So a situation where let's say a deceased father leaves an acre of land. He leaves the land for his children, 4 children.
Right.
He may have determined which portion each child is to get, or he may not have said so. Yeah.
Right.
But the idea will be each of his 4 children get a portion of the land, a quarter of the land. Yeah. And of course, the children want to use this land then to build. Okay. Will that engage physical planning processes? And if so, to use Aisha's question, or walk us through that, please.
Right. That is not an unusual thing that happens. It happens every day. And again, it goes back to the requirements of the bank. If the bank is going to give you a mortgage, you have to have the land that you can use as collateral. And so therefore, perhaps Mr. Fortune can give us more information as it relates to possessory title and how it is when people die intestate and then they need to get title for the property. And once that property is obtained, there will have to be an application for a subdivision. And Mr. Layne, you might be quite familiar with the applications for submission. It has to be surveyed, cut up, and we're talking not just cutting up the land and separating the land, but we also have to make sure in that survey there are drains and proper access, road access, and that type of thing. So once that happens, through perhaps possessory title, the subdivision application comes in, the land is separated, then the process is they come to our front desk, there is an application form, they would have to engage an architect or a draftsperson. And that draftsperson will draw a plan, taking into consideration the guidelines of the planning authority in terms of setbacks and in terms of the requirements, which I would say that most of the architects and these guys, they are very familiar with. The drafts people are very familiar with. And like I say, once you come to the front desk, it's a very seamless process. You have 3 copies of their drawings, the permission to build, which would be a copy of your deed and plan. And in instances where that is not available, let's say, for example, as it relates to the question you asked, if the persons are not in a financial position to go through the whole process of getting the legal title for the property, there are other things that we can utilize. For example, if all of the parties are in agreement, let's say the other 3 brothers and sisters said, you know, it's no problem, the 4th brother can go ahead and build. They will just have to come together, do a letter, and they will all sign stating that they agree for this person to build, and they have allocated a certain amount of land for them to go ahead and build. And more often than not, we do accept that as permission to build, and we will go ahead and do the structure for them. Sorry, and approve a structure if the drawing is approval worthy.
Okay. Aisha, you want a follow-up question?
Not well. My question really is, Ms. Lessey. So this is a process whereby you don't necessarily have to go to an attorney to assist you. You can just come to the desk, and the persons at the desk will be able to walk you along together with anybody else, well, the architects and the draftspersons who would help you.
You only need an attorney if there are disputes as it relates to the land and ownership of the land. That's where a lawyer is going to come into play. However, if it's a person that already have ownership of their land and they have title to their land and there are no questions about the land, then they come to the authority, to the front desk, they collect an application form. They are given the guidance in terms of what they need to do, such as getting the drawing and all of that, what fees are payable, and they come back with the application when it's finished. We have a review process. Typically, we use an internal reviewer. We also use a reviewer from the Ministry of Health. We also use an engineer. And sometimes it depends on the nature of the project. If it's let's say it is a jetty, or it's one of those major, massive developments. Sometimes we do engage a number of different review partners. The Airport Authority, for example, if it's in the vicinity of the Point Salines and True Blue area and that type of thing. So we go through these review processes. Sometimes, depending on the nature of the project, it's a huge project. We may require things like an ESI, which is an environmental and social impact assessment, to get done. That is time consuming. But I must hasten to say that over the last months or so, the authority has become extremely efficient when it comes to rolling out applications in a timely manner. In fact, in the last weeks, we have seen less than 6 weeks, less than 4 weeks, people are getting. In fact, I make it my business whenever I go to the financial institutions to literally ask them about how long it takes for resubmissions. Let's say, for example, you submitted an application and you intended to start within 12 months, and for one reason or the other, you couldn't start. Usually it requires a resubmission, and that is taking a lot less time. In 4 weeks, in some instances, the banks are very happy. The drafts people, if you speak to them, they'll tell you they're very happy at the speed at which we are rolling out these applications in recent times.
I'm very happy to hear that, Ms. Lessey, especially on this side as an attorney, because I've had interactions with planning before. And I know that depending on the type of development that you wish to undertake, it can be a time-consuming process, but for good reasons, especially where you mentioned the environmental and social impact statements. But we'll jump into that a little bit more during the course of the discussion. Mr. Layne?
Yes. But I just want to get into the subdivision or the development part of it a bit more. I don't know if Mr. Fortune, you can just take us to the act and tell us what is considered development. Because my understanding is once you are engaged in development, you have to engage with the authority. That's all?
Correct.
Right. So if you can just take us to the act and tell us, because I think there are a few things there that people may find a bit surprising. That certain things are considered as development requiring permission as things are presented.
That is so, Mr. Layne, and it is very important and very that persons would understand, because sometimes people would do things that they may regard as quite trivial in their own opinion, and it may, under the Act, be regarded as development. Now, in the interpretation section of the Act, it basically speaks to development in relation to land means carrying out of building, engineering, mining, or other operations in or over land, the making of any material change to the land. And this is so important in the use of any land or building or the subdivision of land. Now, that is, it's coined in a language that sometimes people may not understand. But let's take, for instance, especially that part about making a material change. You have a dwelling house, residential, and the Act speaks to that. And for instance, you decide to convert it into apartments. Now you are making a change that one might consider a material change in respect to that property. Yes, of course, there will be structural issues now to be considered, because it's not where no longer you've presented a plan to the PDA in regard to a 2-bedroom dwelling house, 3-bedroom dwelling house. Now you're cutting up, and you, as we say in local language or local parlance, and you are making it into apartment. You're interfering with the structure of the property. Now that is something that the Act would consider as a development. And so when the planning authority gets any such information, of course, they may visit you and ask a question like, do you have permission in regards to what you are doing? And of course, if you do not, then they would have the power either to stop you from what you're doing or advise you in regards to what should be done. So I like to take it as any material change. I think it guides me better when you look at any material change in regards to the property. So for instance, if you decide to establish a road, now that is a material change. And of course, you should have some permission from the authority and consideration from the authority before you just start excavating the property and creating roads, because now you may have environmental issues. For instance, if there's a river next door, or you may be interfering with drainage on the property as it was in its natural state. So that is the reason why, again, it goes to your first question and the long cycle objective in regards to ensuring that development is done in an orderly manner. And I think that is what one needs to keep in mind.
Okay, but I noticed the definition also includes subdivision. So if you could just take us to what is subdivision, because I think that's what surprises lots of people.
Subdivision essentially it entails, or it's almost. Let's use the scenario that Ms. Lessey gave before, where there is a lot of land and persons wants to now divide the property, right? Into two or more than two pieces. Of course, you would need what the authority or what the law calls a subdivision approval, and that is again necessary because the authority, first of all, needs to have an appreciation of what is going on with that lot of land. You need to understand that the authority needs to appreciate, okay, the person at the back, would it be a landlocked situation? Does that person have access to get to their property? And the subdivision takes all that into consideration in regards to whether or not there is an allowed road. Again, drainage. Would the person at the back be flooded every time the rain falls, because of how development will take place at the front, or vice versa? And so all these factors are considered when one applies for a subdivision approval. The authority wants to gather all this information before making the decision. So if persons are interested, so for instance, people buy one lot of land, let's say per acre, and decide, okay, you know what, I'm going to sell it in lots. You should, according to the Act, ensure first, before you even put that property up on the market, that you have a subdivision approval. Because I will tell you, even if you attempt to sell the property, that you would encounter problems in regards to registering that deed. And so, because you do not have the approval of subdivision approval in regards to that property. So it is necessary for you to appreciate what you want to do with your property. And then you should get the appropriate permission in regards to that to ensure that you have a smooth flow of things.
I think the part that surprises people though is the gifting. So for example, you have situations where family members, typically a mother or father, they want to give their child a gift of a piece of property so that they could put on a building or something. But I don't know if you agree with me, but the Act as it is now seems to consider that development of the land requiring planning permission, because it doesn't, many times it doesn't involve the financial institutions. Because what may happen is that a father may have acre land, as I said, and during the lifetime, he decides that he will give a child a portion of the land. So he does a survey, as we say, he cut out a piece. He gives them a deed so that they could take that deed to a financial institution or to help finance a building, or he may give them the piece of land that they could then use as collateral to obtain monies to go and study. But it appears to me the Act as it is now considers that development and requiring engagement with planning for that purpose. I don't know if that's your understanding of it, and that's the practice with the department, Mrs.
Let me just respond to that. That is indeed the understanding. And lots of division applications can be quite costly because it is based on the total sum of the land and not the small portion that's being cut off. So what we try to advise people, if you're going to subdivide land, think about all of the subdivisions that you need to do. If you have 5 children, do it all at once rather than cutting out a small piece and then later making another application for a second small portion. because the cost of the subdivision is based on the sum, like I said, of the whole lot. So if you have 3 acres of land, for example, and you're taking out only, let's say, 3,000 square feet for one child, you will be paying for the 3 acres, and that can be quite costly. I've known where it's, I mean, I don't have the listing with me, the schedule with me right now, but it can go as much as 4,000 EC dollars. In fact, I was having a conversation with a realtor not too long ago, and she's saying to me that, hey, smaller lots of land are becoming very scarce. So you're seeing, while there is a lot of land on the market for sale, you're seeing people attempting to sell bigger lots, half an acres, acres and so on, because they do not want to have to go through the cost of subdividing the land and so on. So it's a serious consideration, and I think the public should know what that entails. And as Mr. Fortune stated, it's all about controlling the development. I wanted to add not just the drainage and that type of thing, but we also have to look at the access for emergency vehicles, for example. If the road is too narrow, it's a 10-foot road, it's a 12-foot road, what happens when there is a fire? And right now the planning, we're also thinking about monitoring, because sometimes you have individuals, they put in the drains and the roads and so just to get the lot, just to get the planning permission. But if we do not monitor it, 9 out of 10 times when they are actually cutting the land for sale, they do not put the drains and the roads, the sizes they say they would. So monitoring also is an important component to ensure, because it's critical.
Yes.
Colonel, I have a question for the panel. If you don't mind. I got a question for the panel. There's 2 facets of looking at this. There's the micro facets and there's a macro facet. Many of the zoning
for the audience, I mean, the micro, are we talking about the small local level?
Correct.
The macro, we look at the bigger picture.
Correct. The plot of land, half acre being divided up, access, egress, drainage, etc. Extremely important. That's at the micro level. But at the macro level, be it at the village, at the region, or the town, how are we addressing that? Are we building from the micro to the macro, or from the macro to the micro? Because, for example, let's say on the West Coast, we're on the Guave side of town, all right? These are fishing village. In Grenville, you have a combination of fishing and agricultural. You also have to consider transportation, getting to market. You also have to consider population growth, leisure. There's a number of things that is very important to have a holistic and cohesive physical planning. How are we addressing the whole and then getting to the micro? Because again, yes, building code, extremely important. The regulatory aspects, very important. How are we handling medical services? How are we handling road, public transportation, people getting to work? Things of that sort. How are we addressing that in terms of physical planning?
Okay, I want to suggest we keep that question in mind. Later on, after as the conversation develops, we come back to that, because I know you have some very important ideas regarding where we are and what we need to do if we are really to go forward into the 21st century. So I just want us to come back to that. But I wanted to, what I'm going to ask now is linked to what you raised there. On a previous program with with 2 members from the transport board and 2 police officers, we were discussing road traffic and the whole problem there. Several times they mentioned that, listen, physical planning has a critical role to play with regard to this traffic issue, because one of the problems that was identified was the parking on the road all over Grenada. Yeah. So if I may just ask now, and I also want to come back, just in case I forget, to remind me to ask a question about zoning, because I think it's either you or Mr. Fortune that mentioned it in the opening. How does physical planning, the authority, what role do you see for the authority in terms of this transportation issue, all these traffic issues and problems?
First of all, we do partner with a number of stakeholders, including the Royal Grenada Police Force, who is in fact in charge of traffic in Grenada. However, I would hasten to say that forward planning and zoning is a critical part of planning's responsibility. And as Dr. Fraser alluded to, unfortunately, I'm not in a position to expand on that at this point, but I want to highlight that forward planning is a critical part of what the mandate of the planning authority. And I do know that there are plans on the way to bring a forward planner on board. We do not have one at the moment, but it is such an important issue that there are plans to bring a forward planner on board in a not too distant future. Zoning is something that is a critical aspect of our mandate as well. It is not just the daily approvals, of subdivisions and development and that sort of thing. It is broader and wider than that. And I could see how forward planning also touches and concerns the issue of transportation and traffic and development on a macro level. But like I say, at this stage, I'm not in a position to expound on that. Perhaps, Mr. Fortune, you may have something to add to that.
I don't think I would have much in regards, because one takes guidance from the 2016 Act. All it essentially states is that under community planning, that is part 3, I believe, of the Act. It just speaks to providing for the control of land by zoning or designating specific areas, but it doesn't, as you correctly stated, it doesn't go in depth in regards to that. I think that would take planning. I think it would take a lot of stakeholders, and of course engagement in regards to how we go about the process of zoning, and what are the considerations one would have in regards to zoning areas. And again, it ties back with what you were saying, what you were asking, Mr. Layne, in regards to earlier, in regards to the congestion and so on. Where do we mark, or where do we say, okay, this is an area only for parking? Grenada is small, unless we're considering land reclamation and all the other things. Which part of the city could we consider for that, or where can we consider to say, okay, for instance, other jurisdictions that may have a bus route, a priority bus route, for instance, that is something that would ease congestion and so on in the towns. Can we sit now comfortably and say, okay, we could designate a particular area in the city? So it will take a lot of planning, I believe, and a lot of discussions in regard to zoning, in regards to what you're asking, Mr. Layne, with the congestion and so on in the city. But as it stands now, I don't believe the law as it is make any special provision in regards to that.
Because I don't know if you know, some people hold the view, in fact, some economists hold the view that the expansion of the road system, in particular the feeder roads, as we call them, had the opposite effect to its intent. Namely, it destroyed agriculture. And they said so because the lack of zoning. So what happened is that once you put in the roads, unrestricted development, People then decide to cut up the lands, turn it into residence, and what was $30,000 maximum an acre of land suddenly became $400,000 an acre, because now they decide to put houses there. And that was a consequence of development of roads which were intended to facilitate agriculture. So I just want to make that point in support of the point about the need for forward planning and zoning. You know, I know about some people in the Caribbean say they are absolutely amazed that country as Grenada with such small land, such small amount of land, we don't have zoning. We sell freehold, we don't use leases and all of those things, you know. I know that Dr. Fraser, you want to come in at this point, because I know that fits in with some of the issues you have.
Well, not so much issues. I'm thinking that there is multiple pieces that has to be tied together. Okay, the economic development. We talk about transportation. How much foot transportation we want to do, how much we want to walk around town, big issue. Residents, people getting to work, population growth, demographics, population migration. These are aspects that has to be considered in physical planning. I visited Grenada last year, and I know that there's folks who lives in Sortes and comes to work in Lansapine, have to take 3-4 buses. That is a physical impediment. The busman may make a money, but the whole implications for economic growth, quality of life, etc. It's tough. So the socio-political, the sociology, the economy of the infrastructure, the availability of affordable housing, the architecture of housing. These are some of the aspects that that must be factored in. We talk about, for example, seaports. The Mang, you know, that area develops in its own way over the last several decades. Is there sufficient housing, restaurants? We still have our hospital located, we know what that is, in St. George's. How are we providing broad-based medical service and access to that? There is conversation about
the government has a plan for that.
But how is that plan intertwined to everything else in terms of transportation?
So I guess that's a national discussion. It's not. It goes beyond just what physical planning they're banding. But I understand what you say. And if I may ask Miss Lessey,
but before you go, physical planning has to be one thing, and it has to be holistic. It cannot, you know. And again, there's regional, there's community, and there's different layers, different aspects of it. But please go ahead.
Yeah, no, so I was going to ask Ms. Lessey, though, when you speak about bringing up the plan to bring a forward planner on board, is it to cover these kind of areas?
Absolutely. But I must also hasten to say that we are only one agency. There are a number of stakeholder partners with their own acts that we work with, like the RGPF, like solid waste, like the Ministry of Works and Infrastructure. We work with a number of stakeholder partners, which hopefully in the end we are going to accomplish some element of what you are alluding to. However, I want to go back to the issue of zoning, and I want to support you in what you said, Mr. Layne. In fact, not too long ago, and I like to give stories. I was speaking with someone that runs a business way up in the mountains. It was a water business, not too far from where the sulfur spring is located. And the people that do business and agriculture up there, they have been clamoring to have the road paved and so for ease of access. And to tell you the truth, it really scares me because Grenada without zoning, as soon as that happens, the realtors, without any fetters, are going to be rushing to that area and starting to sell land. And then before you know it, the whole rainforest can actually become a real estate property that is sold out with no consideration for a lot of things. And I think it is critical that this whole issue of zoning becomes a priority, not just for the Planning and Development Authority, but all of our partners, including government, so that certain areas are the protected areas are expanded beyond what is commonly, like the Granite Rainforest. We go beyond that and protect some other areas and zone them that certain things cannot happen, like manufacturing in people's backyards and all of that kind of thing, the kind of things that we do on close to waterways and all of that. So it is very, very critical. And like I say, the Planning Authority, we are mindful of that, but it is not things that we can accomplish just with this agency. It takes a collective approach. In fact, if the legal fraternity hadn't come forward to assist, even with the whole thing of subdivision and ensuring that every time an application for subdivision comes through, that they say, hey, we cannot do it until you have an approved application from planning. We couldn't do it alone. So yeah, I just wanted to highlight that.
But Ms. Lessey, given the size of Grenada, obviously zoning is important, to say the very least. So do you see the authority, how is the authority planning to address this issue within the near future? Is that something that is at the forefront of the authority right now to address?
It is definitely at the forefront, but the plans are still in its developmental stage. We have not hired a department for that as yet, a person, an individual responsible for that as yet. A lot of work has been done in the past. I understand that there are archives everywhere, but it's getting someone on board to really put everything together. We have some mapping that's happening right now, but like I say, it is top of mind and something we definitely intend to address in the not too distant future.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Yes. So, Dr. Fraser, I want to come back to you again. I know you, when some discussions we had, I know you have a view that we have what we have now, and in many cases, there is no room for expansion. Because, for example, many areas of Grenada, you have houses on both sides of the road. So any thought about widening the road is almost out. Yeah. Over the last 15, 20 years, we have these big vehicles that now are there. They use the road all hours of the day, including peak time. They use the road. And I know we had I think I said to you once that when I think 15, 20, maybe 30, 40 years down the line, at the time when maybe certainly maybe you and I not wrong, I'm thinking we have to either go below the ground or go above the ground in terms of roads. And I know you said to me, no, there's another way. Maybe cheaper, more realistic.
Well, regarding that specific conversation, we have to be mindful of one, humanism, two, futurism. Where do we want to be tomorrow, and where we are now? And the question is, how do we transition to a system, an infrastructure that's sustainable, that will meet the needs of the population in the different facets of the population. I think that as I reflect on it, the road network in Grenada, primarily as it is right now, I think there's an opportunity to reclassify most of the road to secondary and tertiary road, and there's a need to build a primary road network. A primary road network that has a hub and spoke component. In that, let's say, for example, the entire around the Grenada area being a road without deforestation, having one circle with a number of spokes leading into the various parishes and fundamental areas, then tying back the secondary and tertiary road. Because as it is right now, if it is going to, I mean, from Surtees to, let's say, Grandance, 10, 12 miles, if it's going to take you 1 or 2 hours on a daily basis to go to work.
Actually, more than that. Surtees to Grandance will be about, Surtees to town should be a marathon. The Grandance, not about 30 something minutes, 30 minutes.
Okay. Well, if it's going to take you 3 hours to do that one way, that's a problem. I'm talking about looking at tomorrow. So in summary, I think there's a need for reclassifying the current road infrastructure and establishing some new primary roads. I think that could alleviate a lot of the bottlenecks that we are experiencing right now.
Yes.
I'll be glad to do a concept sketch for Ms. Lessey at some point.
Well, fortunately or unfortunately, it doesn't fall under the planning unit. And I think the ideas that you have would be very, very well supported. And I'm sure a lot of people have put forward quite a bit of those kinds of ideas. And so, in fact, there was a popular politician, I don't quite remember his name now, but he has this concept, God rest his soul, to build a road from Carriacou to Grenada. But I think what you're proposing is really good. And the first thing people are going to ask is about funding and where is that money coming from? And all of that is a big discussion that encompasses a wide range of considerations and stakeholder involvement. And that may not necessarily fall directly under the purview of planning. But of course, we see ourselves as an important partner in the discussion. And, yes.
And having quite a while now, I've been hearing of the potential of gas reserves belonging to Grenada. I think we have to take a holistic view to look at that and coalesce that with our infrastructure to put us where we want to be.
In terms of funding the infrastructure.
In terms of funding, yes.
Yes.
Yes. You had a question? You had an intervention, Aisha?
Aisha, you're on mute.
Yes, I just realized that I was on mute. No, not particularly with regards to this discussion. I have something coming up though that I wanted from Ms. Lessey, but for now.
Okay, so sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, Mr. Layne, just to add, because you did have a concern and Ms. Lessey also raised it. What I've been saving, I believe, and I'm sure probably yourself or Ms. Mclean may have come across some of these documents. What I've been saving some of our agricultural lands is because the Ministry of Agriculture, I do believe, when those lands was purchased, have covenants in them. I don't know if you came across any, but you would see some of these deeds sometimes that speaks to the structure that must be erected on the property. And I myself had on some occasions to make applications to of course the state, asking them to consider or reconsider the covenant, because now persons we are living in a more developed age. Persons probably want to put bigger structures on the property and so. But of course, the state is always careful, because we may have the same situation that you're alluding to, where persons want to, in a way, convert those agricultural lands into residential areas. So so far, what I've been, I believe, protecting or saving some of these agricultural lands from you seeing greater development is because there are covenants in them that prevent the erection of especially fixtures on the property and so. I just wanted to add that.
Actually, I've never seen anyone with covenants. I just know that there's the Crown Lands Act, which says that if you want to dispose of it within 12 years, then you have to get permission. But I'd be interested to see that, because I remember had someone raise once. In fact, that discussion was another item. They were saying that, for example, in Trinidad, you would have come across that people have basically what is freehold. They have leases for 300 years, 999 years, and so, and I remember once asking why this, because that is basically a freehold. And it was said the covenants are there. When you give a lease, you can give covenants. The covenants are what they are able to control what happens on the land. Of course, you can sell land and have covenants, but there will be a problem in terms of enforcing those covenants down the line. But if the state exercising its power and authority to make laws was to do the zoning, it would be completely different. Because I know, for example, in Trinidad, they enforce those things strictly. If you buy a piece of land and you buy it in a particular zone, then you know you're limited in terms of what you can and what you cannot do. But I'll be interested in seeing any of these properties with the covenants on them, because they are the destruction of agriculture. And someone is saying in the chat here, zoning is very important. If we don't know agricultural lands will be used for housing development, and the rocks will be left for agriculture, as is the case with rigid paneling when they go on water. I don't want to mention any business specifically. But it is the idea is that people have raised one or two other things in the chat here. The whole issue is the kind of laissez-faire, unrestricted, one may say almost, development of lands, because physical planning have their own mandate. If somebody comes to them, physical planning has to operate within their mandate. I don't think physical planning will be stepping beyond their boundary if they want to say that we're not authorizing your project because this area is for this purpose or that area is for that purpose. I think if somebody has an issue, then they will have to engage in law themselves. At least that's my understanding of the situation now.
I have a question.
Yeah,
what programs are there in place to educate the public on zoning and other regulatory requirements, thus mitigating the sort of ad hoc response or ad hoc development in terms of educating folks on zone, for example, building code? What programs are there in place?
Well, programs sorry, go ahead, Ms.
All right, let me respond to that. In terms of zoning, like I said, because there are not very strict or wide zoning laws, we do what we can from time to time. But in terms of educating the public, we do have, in fact, coming out of Hurricane Beryl in Caracol, we had seminars. We actually educated people on the building codes. We have workshops. We use the media as much as possible. We have our Facebook page as the PDA. We do a lot through the media, and like I say, we have engaged people like Mr. Layne, who is a well-known engineer. We have ESIA consultants on board. And something you said earlier, Mr. Layne, about first of all, let me say it's the board of directors of the planning authority that approves applications. However, if there is a particular project that seems to have a number of environmental and other concerns, the board does have the right to look at those issues, and if the issues seem to be insurmountable and it's the it's perceived to create a lot of problems for the environment. The board does have the autonomy to not approve or to defer an approval, irrespective of everything. So I just wanted to highlight that.
But of course, an aggrieved person can then go to court, seek judicial review.
Yes.
They can allege that you're acting outside of your mandate and all of those issues.
Exactly. Yeah. There is a committee that is supposed to be on the board that really looks at if a person is not happy that their approval didn't happen or whatever. They can put in an appeals tribunal, more or less. They have that right to appeal a decision. But at the end of the day, the board does have the autonomy to look at a number of factors outside of someone just submitting a structurally sound, application and so on. So we do have that in place, and there are times when we have had to say, irrespective of everything, we don't think that this particular development is good for this particular spot or the type of business that you want to do. It's not going to sit well with the community. We do have a lot of concerns. So we've done that in the past. And
so
I'm sure.
Ms. Lessey, you mentioned saying that this type of development would not necessarily do well with the community. So
in other words, the social implications.
Yes.
Yeah.
So what I wanted to know is it that during the process of approving a particular application that may come before the
deliberating,
or deliberating, is it that they involve or the authority involves the community? Is it that persons do we hold town hall meetings, for example, with members of the community to determine whether or not the development should be approved or shouldn't be approved? How much is the community involved in the process, especially when it's like maybe a large development?
All right. So whenever we have applications for residential houses and so on, as long as it's below 2,500 square feet, is a very straightforward process. Typically we have three review partners. We have health, we have planning internally, and we also have an engineer. And unless, like I say, it's a very simple process. However, when we're talking about large developments, the Act actually stipulates how we go about this process. There is something called a scoping exercise, and we have the forms at the authority. So depending on the size and the scope of the project, we will provide that document, and that document has a questionnaire that the developer has to do. It requires town hall consultations and questionnaires in the community and all of that. Once that scoping is done, we have a consultant that works with us, and she reviews the scoping document to determine whether a full ESIA, that is Environmental and Social Impact Assessment, is necessary. And if it is, we will provide, or the PDA will provide the terms of reference to the ESIA consultant. That ESIA will be done. And all of that. Usually this type of application takes a much longer time because it is expansive, it is deep. Oftentimes we have members in the community who will come forward once they know, get wind that the development is proposed for the area. They may write us letters. We have people like the Grenada land actors before we had the Willie Reddit foundations and all of these. And these people, it is necessary because sometimes they are the conscience of the PDA, the conscience of our administration. So they are necessary, and quite often, they may seem like a thorn in the flesh, but they are necessary, and they make us think and they make us consider and all of those considerations, and so they're important.
Let me ask though, in terms of your staff, how much enforcement and monitoring are you really able to do, given your staff? We had a session here with the Bureau of Standards, somebody from there, and he acknowledged that monitoring all of these things quite difficult, and he said I think they have a staff of 24. So in terms of your
yes. No, you go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, in terms of your staff and your capacity to really follow up on those things, where do you stand?
Right. We have a total of about 6 development control officers, and we have about 6 or 7 compliance officers. And our capacity obviously is limited. And the good thing about it is that we work along with stakeholder partners in the banking industry, because they make it mandatory that persons that are getting mortgages, that they have to come to planning and so on. In terms of what we do with other projects, other structures that just pop up everywhere, sometimes we take a softer approach where we ask them to stop, we stick notices on the buildings, we ask them to come in and have conversations with us. 9 out of 10 times people do comply, they come in and we work with them and guide them, because our job at planning is not really to punish people, but we try to bring people within compliance, right? So we guide and we help people to submit the application. Ultimately, what we want people to do is to submit the applications, and that's what our compliance officers do. And from time to time, you have people who are just insisting on breaking the law, and that's when we do the enforcement notices and so on. And it gives them 28 days to bring the project back to its original state, and that can go to court. And we do have a number of persons, like I say, that we have. We're in the process of taking to court, and that has been taken to court in the past, because planning has been around for a long time.
Okay,
Yes.
before we go on further, I just want us to take a short break just to recognize the sponsors of the program: GEM Professional Solutions Inc., GEM FM, carrying the program on FM radio out in Canada, and also Grenada Technical and Allied Workers Union, GTAM.
Attention all workers, your health and safety at work are critical. At Grenada Technical and Allied Workers Union, we are dedicated to ensuring you have a safe and secure work environment. If you encounter unsafe conditions or are involved in an accident, take immediate actions. Report it to the company, your shop steward, and make sure it reaches your union. Your health and safety is a priority, and a strong union means a strong voice for your rights. Don't wait. Address concerns right away and protect your well-being. For a safer workplace and a better quality of life, stand with the Grenada Technical and Allied Workers Union. Together, we can create a safer, healthier work environment for everyone.
Okay. And Ms. Lessey, as you may well imagine, given the difficulty of planning, because in fact we mentioned that there's always attention that there would be criticism of the department and the work and the procedure. In fact, we're not going to ask you to comment at all. I just want to mention some from the chat, but we're not going to ask you to comment on them. So one person is saying it appears that PDA only has teeth for the small man. The same person is saying that I think in terms of the monitoring and the town hall meetings and so, that this almost never happens. The Woodford community is a testament to such, no consultation. John Paul Debo is asking, is it still possible to enforce building setbacks in the future zoning regulations to allow for road expansion? Or has development already progressed too far for that to be effective? In other words, the horse already bolted. And the same person who raised about the Woodford is also saying, since we're on the topic of zoning, how can a cement batching plant, asphalt plant, and quarry be constructed in close proximity to a residential area? And the city is currently taking place in Woodford. And somebody else spoke about Lassages. We don't want to ask you to comment on those, but I'm almost certain you are aware being in Grenada, being there, that you are, in a sense, in the line of fire. Because I very much understand this is a difficult work, and personally, I think the physical planning act is effective. And in fact, I asked earlier, it may well be that you can open yourself to claims in what we call this about judicial review claims, depending on the reasons given either for approving or not approving a project. It would have been so much easier in your zoning. So you know you can't build there, you can't do this there, you can't do this there. There are other areas if you want to do something there, maybe, but you have to go through a particular process. Mr. Fortune? You're muted.
Yes, I tend to agree because with zoning, with everything, where the law is involved, you have more or less an objective standard generally. So one can just look at it and objectively say, this is not possible. Yes, the circumstances that the authority currently faces is that we do not have that, or they do not have that. And as a result, there can be some degree of subjectivity in regards to what happens. And of course, when that is not outside of the purview of the law. When one looks at is it section 31, when we look at the enforcement of development control, it speaks to where individuals who does not obtain permission from the authority to develop land, or may have obtained permission and decided to go against what the original plan would have been. Now, here is a situation that provides the authority with some degree of discretion. Yes, but again, there is an objective standard. When one looks at it, it says that the authority may, if it considers expedient to do so, having regard to the provisions of the physical plan. So he's speaking about the zoning issue again, Mr. Layne, having consideration to the physical plan for the area. Now, what is the physical plan for that area? Is it supposed to be a residential area, right? The authority could consider that, and it says any other material consideration. So you may have a situation where one looks at it. So now, let's just go back a bit. This is a situation where the authority has a discretion. So it doesn't necessarily mean the authority would stop you, but the authority could consider, okay, you have done this. Could it be rectified without us stopping you? Yes? Or whatever you're doing, no, does it have an environmental impact? Then I need to stop you because this does not fit into the plan for the area. Yes? So again, the authority does have a degree of discretion that they could use. I think one of the, and maybe Ms. Lessey could agree or disagree in that regard, one of the downsides to it though is that sometimes when these discretions are used, the public doesn't know. The public has no idea in regards to what consideration would have been taken. So I'm just giving an example for what it's worth. A person may construct on a coastal area or in a coastal region on the sand. And we know, right? And so the authority may have to step in because the authority may say, no, this is not a construction for this area. It may be a nuisance. It may be a hazard in itself. You may be interfering with the marine environment and so I need to stop you. And then we have another person who goes up into the mountain and construct a nice little tower up there, probably to help people when they go hiking in the night and they get lost, they may rest there. Yes, of course, it's development. Now the authority could consider and say, okay, you did not ask for permission also. But having regard to the circumstances, could we ask you now to do the correct thing and not necessarily demolish what you would have constructed up there, right? Having regard to the factors, again, the material consideration, what harm was caused or what harm is going to be caused by your actions. So again, you see, but the authorities sometimes, of course, you do not come out and explain those things. And sometimes when people recognizes that this was done in the case of A and this was not done in the case of B, then you have people, following their own beliefs in regards to what happened, and that could lead to start with the conclusion that, okay, it's a small person or it's a big person, and so they get special treatment. Not necessarily. What got them a particular result was the considerations that the law speak of, the authority can take recognition of.
I think the general concern, though, that people raise, whether informed or uninformed in some cases, is they want to have a sense of the equality before the law. Listen, the rules apply to everyone, and that someone doesn't have an advantage because they are bigger or they are connected as a case may be. But you always have those issues in any society, anywhere, anytime. And I think the important thing in these circumstances is the communication. So I don't know if you could speak to that in terms of the practice and the capacity of the PDA to communicate to the public. Bearing in mind, you'll always have issues. You'll always have differences of opinion. In fact, recently there was a very beautiful quote from the outgoing president of the CCJ. The judgment he gave, a very important judgment out of Ghana, and he started off by saying, listen, it is in the nature of human affairs that there will be differences in terms of how you treat and how you deal with those differences. And in this regard, the issue of communication. I don't know if you want to just speak to that, Ms. Lessey.
Before Ms. Lessey answers, Dr. Fraser wanted to make a comment, I believe.
Oh, I just want to, what I want to state is that, and Fortune, I get a sense that there's a lot of reaction, a guy built a house there, one bill in the sand, and then, we kind of check it out and, pull him into the arms of the law. But I think that we need to have a vision. We need to have a national plan. There need to be national planning. There need to be regional planning. There need to be parish planning. What happens in Guave will be different from what happened in St. David's. What happened in, Paradise is going to be different from what happens in Tempe. We need town planning. We need village planning. And of course, the holistic transportation planning. Within each of those, there'll be specific zones that help regulate and pull the diverse pieces together for a cohesive society. So in order to prevent more chaos or things getting out of spiral, I believe that those layers of planning have to be considered, have to be put in place. If not, we'll be chasing stuff everywhere. Just a thought.
Thank you.
I totally agree with you again. Sorry, Ms. Mclean. But yes, it goes again to things just being objective and remove a lot of the subjectivity in regards to it. That way, of course, there is consistency, there is certainty of the law, and of course, it will be easier to apply. So I totally embrace what you're saying in that regard.
A central question we have to consider is that how are we moving from where we are to where we want to be, and whether or not how do we do? I think that's the central question. Yes, we will implement the regulation. We will flex the law, but how do we move from where we are to where we should be? I'm talking holistically. It's not River Road, it's not Belmont, but holistically. How do we do that at the parish level, at the regional level, et cetera, et cetera? I think we have to look at that first. Let's move from the macro to the micro, as opposed to the focus on the micro, hoping to get to the macro. It's my thought.
Yeah. So let's see what did it come in.
You're on mute, man.
Sorry about that. No, I was saying, not at this point. I quite get what Dr. Fraser is saying, and it goes back to one of the questions that one of our viewers asked. About in how we deal with the things that already are in place, and how do we go forward. And that is a question. When we have a time, the road network was built at a time when we didn't have this amount of transportation, when at a time when people had an acre of land, but the pride of being able to build their concrete house on the road and be able to jump from the bus onto their step, all of that kind of thing. And we're dealing with that, even with applications, when we stop people and they say, listen, this person house is 2 feet from the road, this one, why are you targeting us? And we have to start somewhere. What we do, we talk about road reserve. When we tell people, yes, your boundary mark may end within a foot of the road, but it's important that you build back from that area in case the government has plans. We see what's happening in the Woodlands area, where a strip of road cannot be completed because you have people step actually in the road. The government is trying to build drainage. It's a challenge. So how do we deal with it? It's a major challenge. And Dr. Fraser, it would be nice if you would come back to Grenada and join the PDA, because we do need your expertise in.
Is there imminent domain?
Yes, there is. There is. We call it compulsory acquisition. We call it eminent domain in November.
Okay.
Yes, the government can acquire property. There's a process for public purposes. Yeah, and even that's a flexibility with it. But no, what I was asking Ms. Lessey, if you would think that there is whatever, just for want of a better term, a communication deficit with regard to the work of the PDA. Because I know in particular public bodies that engage a lot with the public, they have communication officers, they have programs regularly explaining their work and so people know every, yes, that's the way.
At the Planning Authority, we attempt to do the best we can to educate where we can. But there are certain situations that we find ourselves in, and it is not new. Planning has always had challenges with as it relates to the agendas of various stakeholder partners and stuff like that. Everything always comes back to planning. But we have to be mindful, that there is a developmental agenda, there is an economic agenda, there are political agendas, there is all kinds of agendas that, as a planning authority, we have to balance, and we understand that sometimes there's a fine line between, for example, you have the GTA, and they are clamoring for more rooms. Why are they clamoring for more rooms? Because the people are begging, the people of the region, Grenadians are begging for airlift transportation to other islands, to other countries of the world that is so difficult and so expensive. The airlines are saying, hey, if you do not have more rooms, then we cannot, there's no justification for increasing the airline capacity to Grenada. And as an authority, we have to work with other stakeholder partners who are needing these things, and then we have to balance the land actors, and we have to balance the willy redheads, and we have to balance. So sometimes you're absolutely right. The public may not be always informed, and they're allowed to come up with what their ideas of what's going on and stuff like that. But sometimes at planning, we find ourselves in a difficult position, and it's not new. So it has nothing to do with a particular administration. It's just the way it is,
Yes, but my specific question was whether, just like a business requires to have a good business, an accountant also, some person who plays that function, and the larger you get, the more important that becomes in terms of financial control. do you consider that, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I'm just throwing it out, whether, for example, a communication officer, communication specialist, whether that is something, for example, the PDA requires, so that you can
Absolutely. We
constantly,
can benefit from that. We can
yes,
definitely benefit from that. And it's not just the whole issue of communication on projects and stuff like that. There's a lot of things people don't know. People don't know that
what
excavation.
processes,
Exactly.
exactly,
If you
exactly,
have to excavate, you need planning permission because it's considered development. If you are
right,
doing a concrete drain, it's considered development because we have to look at where the water is ending up. We have to, if you're building a shop on the side of the road, if you're doing material changes to your, there's a lot of information that people have heard, but they need to hear it more.
they
They
need
definitely need to
on
hear
a
it
regular basis,
on a regular basis.
to
They have to be
reinforce, to
sure.
reinforce.
They
So
need
I
to know
mean,
what the application process is. They need to have that done as clockwork. They need to know that an application is required for lot subdivision and not learn that when it's time to close on the sale and their lawyer is informing them of that, because it absolutely, I agree with you.
yes, yes, yes.
Mhm.
Because the 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 person who goes by the name Twinkle like Diana says PDA, and that was the person who was commenting. They say PDA is doing what they can with the human resources they have, but we have the 2016 Act, and that should be everyone who works at the PDA's Bible along with the building code. But as I said, there'll be differences. Development is not easy. Someone from another island, another small island as us, told me recently, maybe we need to reconsider what we treat as our assess to be development, and maybe some of the big structures and so we think of as development. If we consider that, maybe we may not conclude that is so. I mean, that's a whole discussion in itself in terms of people's own values, their outlook, and so on. But as you correctly said, Ms. Lessey, you have all of these diverse stakeholders. Everyone has a view, and I think it is the best that everyone is heard. That's maybe why we will end up with a balance in these matters. Sorry, go ahead, Aisha.
Dr. Fraser, I'm curious. What actions do you think the authority can do to become more modern? Because to me, I'm hearing an issue. There seems to be a bit of a backlog in terms of, well, not a backlog. I would use the word backlog actually. I would say the authority and the process may not be as modern as it could possibly be. For some reason, I feel that way because in as much as Ms. Lessey said that a person would have to come into the office to get a form to do this, to begin the process. What have you seen regionally or internationally as a standard in terms of these applications? And what do you think that the authority can do to bring Grenada into this more of a modern time?
Yeah, and I really cannot speak of any specific example in that. But again, automation is a big thing, as opposed to that's walk in the door to get it done. Do we have the technology infrastructure in place? Do we have the cultural level in place so that an end user, a consumer, could participate, interact, and synthesize effectively with Ms. Lessey, I would say. Do we have the infrastructure to facilitate that efficiently? That's a big thing. But I think it's more than that. It's more than let's get a couple more computers and let's get a more couple laptop. Let's put it on the internet. I believe it has to be at the level of parish planning. I've said that before. Regional planning, West Coast, the road, the water, electrification, big deal. medical services, commerce. What is the impact on fisheries, agriculture, employment? This is all physical planning aspects. Tourism is big. You know, the transportation or the volume on the island. You know, how do we manage that? You know, I think we have to start at, we have to look at many of those things. The village planning, you know, the community planning. Ms. Lessey, you rightfully spoke about people's participation. Very essential, because there's humanism and there's futurism, and how do we balance the two in order to get the desired effect? Another question we could ask ourselves and do the research: what are countries that make the leap from where they were to where they are today? For example, I don't know that the Singapore model might work in Grenada, but there are similar concepts where you know, countries made the leap from agrarian, from chaos to organization and effectiveness. And I'm saying that we can do it too if we you know, get that national plan, get that national vision. The Bible tells us where there's no vision, the people perish. And we need to have that vision, and we need to have that macro and micro plan. That's my thought.
One of the things that I think is a constant repeat in the whole discussion is the input of stakeholders. The authority on its own cannot move forward without stakeholder support. And Ms. Lessey, I certainly hope that you do get more support going forward, because I see the vision, I see your efforts, but it certainly seems as though there more needs to be done so that you can get to, or the authority can get to where it needs to be.
And let me just
Absolutely.
add something to what you said. You talk about stakeholders. For example, the police, safety, security, you know, these are very important stakeholders in getting, you know, a holistic infrastructure for efficiency. You know, these are certain participants, but very important. The fire department. Where does ambulance, how does an ambulance get through St. George's to go up to the hospital on a bad day? These are factors.
Let me ask a specific questions this year. When the folks on the transport and the police were here, I think there was a mention when they several times they mentioned physical planning. Is there a requirement now for anyone who is, or any plan that you approve, that there must be garage space for vehicles?
Yes. In fact, there is a stipulated amount of parking spaces for every structure, whether it is residential or commercial.
That has been so, that's a recent regulation?
I do not recall exactly when it was put in place. I can't speak to that, but it's definitely in the regulations, and it speaks to how much car spaces, and we will not approve an application without designated car spaces. For example, every hotel will need 2 car spaces for every 4 rooms, you know, things to that effect. There's a total schedule to that, and this is one of the things that but I want to address the question that Ms. Mclean asked about automation. Or I think you asked about things that can be done to make the PDA more modern and that sort of thing. Automation is something that we've had under consideration, and in fact, a substantial amount of consultation has been done on that particular matter. The hope is that one day we would have, in a not too distant future, a system where people can submit, because, you know, printing, we're looking at our footprints and working in a more green space. We're looking where people can submit applications online, they can check the status, they can It's going to be public information. Perhaps Mr. Fortune can assist me with that, but I believe that there has been a ruling not too long ago where it is mandatory that we make applications public documents. So now someone that has an objection to an application, they can come in and have access. They can go through the drawing, go through the ESIA. They can take copies of it and all of that. It was a big fight, but I believe eventually the persons won, and now it is precedence throughout the region. So automation is something, like I say, that we should be looking forward to at the PDA in the not too distant future. The board is very supportive of it. Like I say, we've had a number of consultations, and we should see that happening hopefully soon.
In the near future. There's a comment from John Paul, and I think this resonates with my thoughts as well and my feelings about this discussion. He said the challenges of enforcement aren't easy, especially with long-standing development patterns and limited resources. I think it's important to recognize the PDA's efforts to open up dialogue and strengthen accountability. Public sessions like this display sincere attempts to move towards more transparent and balanced planning. And I certainly agree with the comments. Puts a face to the authority, and people understand that they're actual persons in the background doing what is necessary for the development, of Grenada.
Absolutely. Thanks.
As another question again to either Ms. Lessey or Mr. Fortune. Someone actually asked me this. There was a structure going on, and I think it was two levels, two levels up. And the person was complaining. That listen, they were never consulted about that. The structure blocking out the view that they had of the sea, and so on and so forth. Is there any requirement in those circumstances? Might not have been legal requirement in those circumstances for neighbors also to be consulted?
Yeah, Ms. Lessey, I think you're on mute. You're on mute.
Yeah, I am not aware that the Act speaks to anything regarding the blocking of view. Perhaps Mr. Fortune could help me with that, but I am not aware. And in fact, it's an issue that a lot of people have to deal with. Just today, I was having a conversation about it, especially in those new developments. You might be the first or second person to buy a lot, and then suddenly you find that there are structures popping up to the front of you, side, back of you, multiple stories. Our consideration, and that's why setbacks and all of these things are very, very important. We want to make sure that the air quality, the airflow, that there is sufficient space in case that there's a fire between buildings. We want to make sure that there are emergency entrances and exits and stuff like that. But unfortunately, I am not aware of any law that makes it mandatory that I cannot block your view or I cannot go up a certain level. In fact, the law speaks to one of our review partners, the Airport Authority. They are very strong about buildings going up a certain level because of incoming flights and how it can affect it. But outside of that, Mr. Fortune, are you aware of anything in the law that speaks to that?
Or at least deed restrictions. Are there deed restrictions, Mr. Fortune, in various areas?
Well, of course, the when we're speaking about the 2016 Act, it does not, as Ms. Lessey would have stated, address issues like that. In regards to consultation, again, of course, Ms. Lessey did speak to consultation. And again, one must appreciate that you also have a responsibility if there is a development that is happening. Remember, the authority, the resources of the authority is limited. And so one can always reach the authority, I'm sure Ms. Lessey would agree, and state their concern. No, the Act, however, doesn't speak to that. But of course, a person has a right to light and a view and so on. And of course, if one feels disadvantaged in such regard, they can find their redress in the law. So they can go to court and seek injunctive reliefs, and so that is outside of the planning authority. So they would find redress, not necessarily with the planning authority, because the act does not say that the authority should stop a development or not approve a development because some neighbor may have a disagreement in regards to their view. But that person can also find their redress in other areas.
So are you saying that the PDA is not responsible for community planning? Is that what you're saying? Because what was described is that Tom builds a house, someone else builds another, and someone else builds another, blocks his view, cut off his access. It means that it's ad hocism. That's what I'm hearing.
No, not at all. Not at all, Dr. Fraser.
Okay.
We're not talking about, for example, there is a development and where multiple lots were sold. I have lot 1, you have lot 2, you have lot 3. I am the first developer. I build my house, right? You may have a lot in front of me. It could be 5,000 square foot, right? And that person comes, the Planning Act dictates what can be approved. And unfortunately, view, we're talking specifically, we're not talking to access. Access, when you say access, it's broad. It could be road access, all types of different access. We're talking about his view. There is nothing specific in the act that addresses that. However, as Mr. Fortune stated, there may be something in other laws. For example, he might be able to claim that he is mentally disturbed as a result of that, whatever. But this is for a court of law in a totally different situation. But as far as the Planning Act is concerned, we do not have anything in place to protect people's view.
There's an aspect that's called spatial design. Spatial design and urban planning help manage these types of things. View blocking. I think you want cohesion. So spatial planning and urban planning are facets of physical planning that we have to consider.
I think the law in the US is a bit different on the issue of views, and that's part of the problem, because I actually know of people who were shocked, people who live in the US, when the point was Lessey made there, that there is no right to have view. Yes, you have the right to air and so, but you have no right to have view as such. So you have a nice view on somebody built in front of you. I don't think that there is any redress you could have. But in fact, I don't want to do batters away to the court.
And that's why
that is
yeah.
If you have a land development, you have cover. Yes, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say that is why we have specific setbacks. For example, if you're building a house, there must be a mandatory 6 foot from the minimum of 6 foot from the boundary line, and 6 foot on your side, 6 foot on the neighbor's side. So there is literally a 12-foot space between both of you, unless of course your neighbor and you agree to reduce that space. But like I say, there must be sufficient space for in case there's a fire and that type of thing. But setbacks is what we mandate. Outside of that, views, unfortunately not. Perhaps going forward, because there's been a discussion of amending certain aspects of the act to add things, because times are changing with environmental concerns and modernization, things are changing. So we may see a revised act that addresses these things in the future. But for now, unfortunately, it doesn't exist.
What I thought there was, and that's my question was related to that, is whether if you want to go up more than 2 levels, whether the PDA in those circumstances has to consult the neighbors. I probably need to check it, but I thought there was a requirement as that. You can go, the PA can approve, you have a 2-level building, they can approve it. But beyond that, if there are neighbors, that the neighbors have to be concerned. They are wrong. Someone who I know
I
is
am
saying
not
something.
sure. It depends on the use of the building, whether it's
Yes.
residential or if it's a hotel that will be bringing in multiple people and traffic and all that kind of thing. So it really takes into consideration the use of the project.
Yes, but I was just speaking about the procedure, given the use,
Mhm.
if there's a specific procedure. But I just want to, someone to say sometimes PDA stops persons from constructing buildings. There are two I can think about. After years, these buildings become a public hazard. And one is referencing, I think it's St. George's on Scott Street opposite Food Fair, a massive building. And one in somewhere in Woodlands or something. So the issue I think here is whether the PDA, the issue here is, I have a grandson with me. The issue here is whether the PDA has any input, has any obligation with regard to these dilapidated buildings over St. George's and in some other places, which are actually public hazards.
I mean, it is something that I have never considered, but it does make sense because if we stop a structure and that structure never recommenced and no submission, or if they made a submission and it didn't pass, so it wasn't approved, then that structure, that incomplete structure remains there indefinitely. And depending on the how far the project have gotten, it's a considerable amount of brick and mortar. And I think I know exactly that one that is being referred to. But it's definitely something we can do, and it is something we can work with definitely the Ministry of Works, Ministry of Infrastructure to see how we deal with these situations, because it's definitely something that's not currently on front of mind for the PDA. But I'm glad it was brought up because it's something to look into. After we stop projects, it's abandoned, what happens over time. It can become a public hazard. I do agree with that.
Yeah, there may be other legislation which actually, I think the Ministry of Health or one of them, they have the authority to actually pull it down and then charge.
Okay, okay. That's where the partnership comes in.
Definitely,
Yeah.
Mr. Layne, sorry. In regards to, just to go back briefly, in regards to what Dr. Fraser had a bit of concern about, and you did say that U.S. law is somewhat different from English law in regards to what we do. And just to be clear that as far as I know, there is no right, Dr. Fraser, to a view. What you may have a right to, I'm sure Mr. Layne will agree, and Ms. Mclean is a right to light. So if the person is constructing and of course they're obstructing your light, of course then you have private remedies as an easement, as a nuisance. You can go before the court. But in regards to a right to a view, I don't believe there is any right in English law to a particular view.
Okay. So I'm going to build on top of the hill then.
That's why Grenadians love on top of it.
Well, hopefully Ms. Lessey approves your application.
Just remember you have to seek permission.
Yeah. My property in Grenada is on top of a hill.
Okay, great. Okay, so we have a few minutes left. It's been a very fruitful discussion. We can take one or two more comments. The common complaint I'm hearing is that it is time to start zoning in Grenada. Even the fact that land is a finite resource is the law allow builders to go over 4 stories. So that person is saying that we may have to actually consider going up. Like in Tokyo and those other places, so as to make greater use of the limited space that we have. So that's what that.
I think the concept of zoning is very important. And I want to tie it back to my earlier comment. Regional, parish level, town level, village level, residential, commercial, mixed use, transportation, electrification, water, demographics, population growth. These you have to pull it all together. We cannot be reacting to individual pieces. It has to be holistic in order to get where we ought to be. That's my final thought.
Right, and we have to always be mindful of the human resources which are available. People as yourself, Grenadian, out there. And I think these engagements are quite useful in terms of the sharing of ideas. And hopefully, some of this will be transformed into actually engaging and assisting in terms of us moving forward. Janis Lessey says, what power does the PDA have when floodplain has been backfilled and people reclaim and put a building on it, like in captivated processes? So I think they say whether the PDA has any role in a practice this person is alleged, I don't know how widespread it is. Actually, people reclaim their lands and then put it up buildings.
It has to be back to zoning. It's zoning. What is the zone? What does the zone dictate? What's the legal framework regarding the specific geography?
So listen, let's see if someone wants to, they have money and they want to reclaim some land from the sea. Does the PDA get involved in that? Does the PDA have a role in that? Will that be development?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yes, it would be. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So physical planning, because that is development. So physical planning will have to be involved. Okay. So before we end it, once again, I just want to recognize those who sponsor this program. It takes effort to get it on, and we have to be. Just recognize those: Gel Professional Solutions Inc., GEM carrying the program out of Canada, and also Grenada Technical and Allied Consumer.
Attention all workers, your health and safety at work are critical. At Grenada Technical and Allied Workers Union, we are dedicated to ensuring you have a safe and secure work environment. If you encounter unsafe conditions or are involved in an accident, take immediate actions. Report it to the company, your shop steward, and make sure it reaches your union. Your health and safety is a priority, and a strong union means a strong voice for your rights. Don't wait. Address concerns right away and protect your well-being. For a safer workplace and a better quality of life, stand with the Grenada Technical and Allied Workers Union. Together, we can create a safer, healthier work environment for everyone.
Yes, Claude Douglas says, excellent program. There need to be more public education on this subject. Communication, again, we come back to. Martin Felix says, great sector, guys. One of the issues that is a legacy of our haphazard development is the lack of business and home numbering. Any plans you know of to address this problem?
No, I mean, I remember growing up as a little girl, and every house in the neighborhood was numbered. That was very forward thinking back then. That has more or less been abandoned, and I think it is something that the country can get back into. But again, like I say, it takes a cohesive, joint approach to getting things like that done. But I think that's a very, very good suggestion. Comment.
I think I did hear another institution. I wonder if it is the Regulations Authority. I think I heard on a different program I heard a mention about some initiative to actually number houses and businesses and so on.
We have another comment. I think this might be the final one. And it says it's from Bob, and he says, PDA, please work with NOASA to make sure that the wetlands in Grenada is protected. I shall remain nameless, but you know where these wetlands are in all 5 parishes. So that's just a general comment.
Noted.
Okay. So, closing remark, Dr. Fraser, starting with you.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to chat with the broader community on aspects of physical planning and provide some perspectives. I still want to say that, you know, the national plan, where's the national plan? Where's the parish plan? Where's the community plan? Where's the town plan? Where's the village plan? The whole community planning, people's involvement, education, these aspects are extremely important. Our road network, our medical services, electrification, water, drainage, sewer. There is quite a number of pieces that constitute the infrastructure and has to be synergistically knitted together. It's not a one-time thing. It's going to take a while, but we can do it.
Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Fortune.
I would like to close by essentially saying that from the discussion tonight, there is a general curiosity in regard to how the PDA functions. I believe also that persons, you know, have a lot of concerns in regard to what they do, and I would like to say that the PDA is a creature of statute, and all the powers and all they could do is essentially within the framework of the law. And what I would like to encourage persons to do is, with that energy, challenge it to your MPs, because the laws are made in Parliament. And so, if there are things that you do not like, things that you disagree with, that passion, challenge it to your MPs. And so they represent you. And that is where the idea will be born. Maybe there will be amendments to the law, there will be considerations, and so, because the PDA can't necessarily do much more than they're doing that the statute gives them and the regulations give them the authority to do. It is essentially for Parliament, if they see the need for some law, or for instance, the whole issue of the zoning, that will take more than just the PDA doing it. It will take the involvement of stakeholders, it will take the involvement of government, you know. So I believe also that we must engage others. Program like yours, I must show my appreciation for, because it sort of sensitizes the public and gives the public an appreciation as to what the PDA does and the authority that they possess. So I must say thank you for a program like this one, Mr. Layne, Ms. Mclean, that takes the initiative to educate the public in regards to the laws and essentially the role PDA plays in our society in terms of development.
Lessey? You're muted.
What I'd like to add is not much, actually. I just wanted to say thanks for the opportunity to have me here. I have been looking at some of the comments, and I know that there is a lot more that the PDA can do in terms of public education. And we are going to continue to take the opportunities that are presented, such as your show, Dr. Layne. Thank you for what you do, and for your viewers and listeners. We really do appreciate you. And I know there are times when it may seem as if we just sit at the PDA doing nothing, but believe you me, there is a team of dedicated young people, a team of dedicated people every day working and thinking about how we can make it better, and how we can enhance the environment, how we can deliver more, how we can get your applications going faster, how we can provide more information. So for the persons who have made genuine comments, whether it's the comments that we have to check ourselves, do more, we appreciate you. And thank you so much. And thanks again, Ms. Mclean, Dr. Fraser. when you're ready to return to Grenada and assist us with that, just let us know. We're ready. Thank you so much. Thanks, Mr. Layne.
You're welcome.
Yes, yes. Yeah, yeah. With the virtual world, so maybe there are possibilities there.
Yes.
Aisha?
I would just like to thank all of our guests for appearing this evening. Indeed, it was a very informative discussion. As we have a comment from Anna, she said, thanks so much, very informative. I think the program is meeting its mandate, that is to provide education and allow people to, be more intertwined with the agencies that are around them. So thank you so much, Ms. Lessey, Mr. Fortune, and Dr. Fraser. We really appreciated your time, and our audience did as well.
Yes.
Thank you. Thanks all.
Okay, so I just want to thank everyone. We're really grateful, and we try to continue this program. I don't want to forget our technical assistant. You don't see him, but he makes this happen. Thank you, everyone. Thank you to the viewers. Thank you, everyone. And see you next Sunday. Thank you.